Run! It's right behind us! Faster, move! Don't leave me!
The voice cut through Soul's rein like a blade through silk, and three men who'd never feared death suddenly understood what terror meant. Ariana Cole pressed her back against the alley's wet brick wall, her gray hoodie soaked through, her bare feet slipping on the slick concrete. She'd survived 847 nights on these streets. She counted because counting made her feel like she still existed. But tonight, drunk men had cornered her in the dark, their hands reaching, their breath reeking of soju and violence. She was invisible to this city, deep brown skin in a place that refused to see her, a homeless woman with nothing but a worn hoodie and eyes that still held fire. Across the alley stood a figure in black, tall, broad-shouldered, face carved from shadow and fury. Kang Min-jae, the Phantom of Soul. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like death itself had taken human form and chosen a side. Welcome to Afro-Korean Dynasty Stories. Relax and enjoy this interesting story. To ensure you get first-hand notification of our latest stores, please subscribe, comment where you're watching from. This story crosses borders because betrayal speaks every language. Like and share. Ariana Cole had been erased from the world the day the foster system aged her out with nowhere to go. For 847 days, she'd learned the brutal mathematics of survival, which shelters closed their doors to women who looked like her, which alleys were safer than others, which strangers would spit and which would simply step over her body as if she were already dead. Soul's neon lights painted the streets in false warmth, but the concrete beneath her was always cold. So she'd become a ghost in a city of 8 million. A black woman the world had decided didn't deserve to be seen, but someone had been watching. Kang Min-jae, a ruthless Mafia king who ruled Seoul's underworld from a fortress of marble and steel, had spent 2 years tracking her movements through the shadows. The man they called the Phantom, who'd built an empire on fear and precision, who'd never broken a single rule in his rise to power. Until tonight. As 3 bodies hit the wet pavement, and the most dangerous man in Korea extended his hand toward a homeless girl in a dirty hoodie, Ariana realized something terrifying. Her invisibility had just shattered. The world hadn't been ignoring her. One man had been seeing her all along, and he was about to break every rule he'd ever made to claim what he believed was his. Ariana Cole counted because counting made her feel like she still existed. Day 1 had been the hardest. The social worker had handed her a plastic bag with her belongings and pointed to the door. "You're 18 now. Good luck out there." No family, no money, no home, just a city that didn't want her and a bag full of clothes that wouldn't keep her warm when winter came. By day 30, she'd learned which convenience store threw out food at exactly 11 p.m. By day 100, she knew which subway station security guards would let her sleep in the corner if she stayed quiet. By day 300, she'd stopped making eye contact with anyone because invisible people survived longer than ones who asked for help. 847 days meant 847 nights on concrete that turned her bones to ice. It meant 847 sunrises, where she woke up still breathing and counted that as a victory. Seoul's Itaewon district came alive after dark. Neon signs flickered in languages she couldn't read. Music poured from bars where people paid more for a single drink than she'd seen in a month. She'd learned to move through the crowds like smoke, there but not there, present but unseen. Her spot was behind a restaurant that served Italian food to rich tourists. The dumpster smelled like garlic and tomatoes, and sometimes the chef left boxes of day-old bread on top instead of inside. It wasn't charity. He'd never looked at her once. But it was something. Tonight the rain had started just after sunset. the kind of cold rain that soaked through her gray hoodie in minutes and turned the alleys into rivers. Ariana pulled the hood tighter around her face and headed for the covered doorway of a closed office building where she sometimes slept. That's when she heard the footsteps behind her. 3 men, drunk from the way they stumbled, loud from the way they laughed. She'd learned to read danger the way other people read street signs, and everything about them screamed threat. Ariana walked faster. They matched her pace. She turned down a side alley, hoping they'd keep walking. They followed. "Hey, girl, where are you going?" One of them called out in slurred Korean. She didn't answer, didn't look back, kept walking. A hand grabbed her shoulder and spun her around. She stumbled, her back hitting the brick wall. The 3 men formed a half circle, blocking her exit. Up close, they reeked of alcohol and cigarettes. "You speak Korean?" The tallest one leaned in, his eyes traveling over her face, her body. "Or you just dumb?" Ariana's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd been in dangerous situations before, men who thought a homeless woman was easy prey. She'd always managed to slip away, to disappear into shadows and side streets. But this alley was a dead end. The rain was too loud for anyone to hear her scream. The man reached for her hood, yanking it down. Rain immediately soaked her hair, running down her face like tears. She'd survived 847 nights on concrete. She wouldn't survive this one. "Don't touch her." The voice didn't shout. It didn't need to. It cut through the rain and the darkness like a knife through paper, and the 3 men froze. Ariana's breath caught in her throat. She looked past her attackers to the mouth of the alley where a figure stood perfectly still. Tall, broad shoulders, expensive black coat that didn't belong in this part of the city. The neon signs from the street behind him turned his face into sharp angles and deep shadows. The tallest man, the one who'd grabbed her hood, turned around and laughed. "Mind your business, friend. We're just having a conversation." "Step away from her." The stranger's voice was quiet, calm, like he was discussing the weather, but something in his tone made Ariana's skin prickle with warning. This wasn't a good Samaritan. This was something else entirely. Or what? The second man pulled a knife from his jacket, the blade catching the light. "You'll call the police? We're not scared of—" He didn't finish the sentence. The stranger moved faster than Ariana's eyes could follow. One moment he was standing at the alley entrance. The next, his hand was wrapped around the knife wielder's throat, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. The man's feet kicked at empty air. His face turned purple. His friends stood frozen in shock. "I said," the stranger's voice was still perfectly calm, "don't touch her." He threw the man against the brick wall so hard Ariana heard bones crack. The body slumped to the wet ground and didn't move. The tallest man finally found his voice. "Do you know who we work for? We're dead." The stranger pulled something from his coat. Ariana couldn't see what it was in the darkness, but the way the remaining 2 men stumbled backward told her everything she needed to know. They ran. They didn't make it 10 steps. Ariana heard sounds she'd never forget. Screams that cut off too quickly. Wet thuds of bodies hitting pavement. Then silence, broken only by the steady drum of rain. The stranger walked back toward her, stepping over the bodies like they were trash left on the street. The light finally hit his face, and Ariana's breath stopped. He was young, maybe early 30s, Korean, sharp jawline that looked carved from stone, dark eyes that held no emotion at all, short black hair styled perfectly despite the rain. He was beautiful the way a sword was beautiful, deadly and cold, and he was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "You're hurt?" His voice had changed, softer now, almost gentle. Ariana shook her head. She couldn't speak. Her back was still pressed against the wall, her whole body shaking. He took off his coat and stepped closer. She flinched, but he moved slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. He draped the coat over her shoulders. It was warm, expensive. It smelled like sandalwood and rain. "What's your name?" he asked. Ariana." Her voice came out as a whisper. He nodded once, like he'd confirmed something he already knew. Then he held out his hand. Not threatening, just waiting. "You're coming with me." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. Ariana looked at his outstretched hand, at the bodies behind him, at the alley with no exit except past him. She had no choice. She took his hand. The car was black and sleek, the kind Ariana had only seen in movies. Leather seats, tinted windows, a driver who appeared out of nowhere and opened the door without saying a word. The stranger, she still didn't know his name, guided her inside with a hand on her lower back. She should have run, should have screamed, should have done anything except sit in this car with a man who'd just killed 3 people in front of her without breaking a sweat. But where would she run to? Back to the streets? Back to the alley where blood now mixed with rainwater? The car drove through Seoul's wealthy Gangnam district, past buildings made of glass and steel that touched the sky. It finally stopped in front of iron gates that opened automatically, revealing a driveway lined with perfectly trimmed trees. The mansion beyond looked like a palace, white stone, tall windows, stairs leading to massive wooden doors. Light spilled from every window, warm and golden against the dark night. "I don't understand," Ariana whispered. "Why am I here?" He didn't answer, just stepped out of the car and waited for her to follow. The front doors opened before they reached them. A woman in a black dress and white apron stood there, her eyes widening as she took in Ariana's appearance. Wet hoodie, bare feet, dirty clothes. Then the stranger bent down and lifted Ariana into his arms like she weighed nothing. "Sir!" the woman gasped. Ariana's heart hammered. She grabbed his shoulders instinctively, not knowing what else to do. His arms were solid beneath her, holding her carefully against his chest. He carried her through the entrance and Ariana's breath caught. The inside was even more beautiful than the outside. Marble floors so clean they reflected the light from crystal chandeliers hanging overhead. A grand staircase curved upward, lined with fresh white flowers. When everything gleamed, everything was perfect, and everyone was staring. Maids in black uniforms stood frozen in doorways. One dropped her tray, the sound of breaking glass echoing through the massive space. A man in a suit stood halfway down the stairs, his mouth hanging open in shock. Their untouchable master was carrying a homeless girl through his palace like she was made of glass. The stranger didn't look at any of them. He climbed the stairs, Ariana still in his arms, his expression completely calm. "Draw a bath," he said to a maid standing in the upstairs hallway. "Bring clean clothes. Call Dr. Park. Tell him to come immediately." Yes, sir." The maid practically ran. He carried Ariana into a bedroom that was bigger than any shelter she'd ever slept in. A massive bed with white silk sheets. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Soft carpet that her dirty feet would ruin. He set her down gently on the edge of the bed. She immediately tried to stand. Her filthy clothes would stain the silk, but his hand on her shoulder stopped her. "Stay." A piece of wet hair had fallen across her face. Before Ariana could push it away, he reached out and brushed it back behind her ear. His fingers were warm against her cold skin. Gentle. So gentle it made her chest hurt. Behind them, a maid had entered with towels and stopped dead, her eyes wide with shock. She'd probably worked here for years and never seen her employer touch anyone with such tenderness. "The bath is ready, sir," another maid called from the adjoining room. He nodded once, then looked back at Ariana. "You'll wash. Change clothes. The doctor will check you're not injured, then we'll talk." "Who are you?" Ariana finally found her voice. His dark eyes met hers. "Kang Min-jae." Ariana woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize. For a moment, panic seized her chest. She sat up fast, her heart racing, ready to run. Then the memories flooded back. The alley, the men, Kang Min-jae, the mansion. She looked down at herself. Clean silk pajamas in soft gray. Her skin scrubbed clean for the first time in months. Her hair washed and dried. The doctor had checked her last night. Gentle hands, quiet voice, asking permission before touching her. No injuries, he'd said, just exhaustion and malnutrition. The bedroom around her was enormous. White walls, soft carpet, a bathroom attached with a tub the size of a small pool. Through the windows, she could see Seoul spreading out below like a toy city. A knock on the door made her jump. "Miss Cole?" A maid's voice, polite and careful. "Breakfast is ready. Mr. Kang is waiting." Ariana's stomach twisted. She wanted to say no, wanted to climb out the window and run. But she was 3 stories up, and even if she could escape, where would she go? Back to the streets in borrowed silk pajamas? She opened the door. The maid led her downstairs to a dining room with a table long enough to seat 20 people. Min-jae sat at one end, reading something on his phone. He looked different in daylight, still dangerous, still beautiful, but somehow more real. He glanced up when she entered, and his dark eyes tracked her movement across the room. "Sit." He gestured to the chair beside him, not across the massive table. Ariana sat. The chair was more comfortable than any bed she'd slept in for 2 years. Food appeared instantly. Rice, soup, grilled fish, fresh fruit, more food than she'd seen in weeks. Her hands shook as she picked up chopsticks. "Eat slowly," Min-jae said quietly. "Your stomach isn't used to this much food." He was right. She wanted to devour everything, but forced herself to take small bites. He watched her the entire time, not eating his own breakfast, just watching. Finally, Ariana couldn't take the silence anymore. "I want to leave." "No." The single word was calm, final. "You can't keep me here." She put down the chopsticks, meeting his eyes. "That's kidnapping. You have nowhere else to go." It was true, but hearing him say it made anger flare in her chest. "That's not your problem." "Yes," he said softly. "It is." "Why?" The word came out louder than she meant. "Why am I here? What do you want from me?" Min-jae set down his phone. He leaned back in his chair, studying her face like he was memorizing every detail. "You saved me once," he said finally. "I'm returning the favor." Ariana stared at him. "I've never met you before in my life." "Yes, you have." "No," she shook her head. "I would remember. You were younger, so was I." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. 15 years ago. You gave me something when I had nothing. You didn't know who I was, didn't know what I would become. You just saw someone who needed help, and you helped." Ariana's mind raced, searching her memories. 15 years ago, she would have been 8 years old, still in foster care, before everything fell apart. "I don't," she started. "You will." He stood up, unbuttoning his suit jacket. "Until then you stay here, you eat, you rest, you let me keep you safe." "Safe from what?" His eyes darkened. "From a world that tried to erase you." He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. "I don't know you," Ariana whispered. Min-jae's expression softened just slightly, almost a smile, but not quite. "You do," he said. "You just don't remember yet." Then he was gone, leaving Ariana alone with her questions and a table full of food she was too confused to eat. 3 days passed before Min-jae spoke to her again. Ariana spent the time like a prisoner in a golden cage. The maids brought her meals. A woman came with clothes in her size, simple but expensive, nothing like the designer dresses she'd expected. No one locked her door, but guards stood at every exit. She wasn't chained, but she wasn't free either. On the 4th morning, Min-jae appeared at breakfast carrying a small wooden box. He set it on the table between them and sat down. For a long moment, he just looked at it, his expression unreadable. "I want to show you something," he said quietly. Ariana put down her chopsticks. Her heart beat faster without knowing why. Min-jae opened the box and pulled out a photograph. Old, worn at the edges, faded from years of handling. He slid it across the table to her. Ariana picked it up with shaking hands. 2 children sat on concrete steps. A church in the background, she could tell from the cross above the door. The girl was maybe 7 or 8 years old, black, skinny, hair in messy braids, wearing clothes too big for her small body. She was smiling, holding out half a sandwich to the boy beside her. The boy was Korean, around the same age, dirt on his face, eyes red from crying. He was reaching for the sandwich like it was the most precious thing in the world. Ariana's breath stopped. She knew this moment. The memory rushed back so fast it made her dizzy. She'd run away from her second foster home. The parents had been mean, their real kids meaner. She'd taken the sandwich from their kitchen and run, planning to hide until they stopped looking for her. She'd found the church steps and sat down to eat. That's when she'd heard crying. A boy huddled against the church wall. Speaking Korean she couldn't understand, but crying in a language everyone knew. Scared, alone, hungry. She'd walked over and held out half her sandwich. He'd stared at her like she was an angel, taken it with shaking hands, eaten it so fast he nearly choked. They'd sat together on those steps until it got dark, not talking. They couldn't understand each other's words, but not alone anymore either. Then a police car had pulled up. Someone had called about the runaway foster kid. They'd pulled Ariana into the car, and she'd looked back to see the boy standing on the steps, watching her disappear. She'd never seen him again. Until now. "You," Ariana whispered, looking up from the photograph to Min-jae's face. "That was you." He nodded once. "I was 10 years old. My parents had just died. I had no family in Korea, no money, no home. I'd been living on the streets for 3 weeks. His voice was steady, but something painful flickered in his dark eyes. "You were the first person who looked at me and saw a human being instead of trash to step over. You gave me your only food. I sat with me when I was alone. You didn't care that I was dirty or foreign or had nothing to offer you." Ariana's hands trembled, still holding the photograph. "You taught me that kindness was real," Min-jae continued quietly. "That even when the world was cruel, there were still people who chose to be good. Then you disappeared. The police took you away, and I never found you again." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "I spent 15 years building an empire, making money, gaining power, all of it for one reason, to find the girl who saved me when I was nothing." "I didn't save you," Ariana whispered. "It was just half a sandwich." "No," his voice was firm. "It was everything." 2 weeks after the photograph, Min-jae walked into Ariana's room carrying a garment bag. "Get dressed," he said, laying it on the bed. "You're coming with me tonight." Ariana looked up from the book she'd been reading. "Where?" "A meeting." "I don't think—" "It wasn't a request." His tone was gentle but firm. "I need you there, please." The please surprised her. In the 2 weeks since he'd shown her the photograph, something had shifted between them. She still didn't fully understand why he'd brought her here, why he watched her like she might disappear any second. But she'd stopped trying to leave. Where would she go? Back to counting nights on concrete? Inside the garment bag was a dress, simple but clearly expensive, deep blue fabric that felt like water between her fingers, matching shoes, a jacket. When she came downstairs an hour later, Min-jae was waiting by the door. He wore a black suit that made him look even more dangerous than usual. His eyes traveled over her once, something unreadable flickering in their dark depths. "Good," was all he said. The car drove them to a building in Gangnam, glass and steel, modern and cold. They took a private elevator to the top floor, where 2 men in suits stood guard outside massive double doors. The guards' eyes widened when they saw Ariana, but they said nothing, just opened the doors. Inside was a conference room that looked more like a throne room, a long table, expensive chairs, and men, at least 15 of them, all wearing suits, all turning to stare as Min-jae walked in with Ariana at his side. Min-jae led her to the head of the table, where a single chair sat like a throne. He gestured for her to take the seat beside it. Ariana's heart pounded. Every eye in the room was on her, judging, questioning, and she could feel their confusion, their shock. "Gentlemen," Min-jae said calmly, sitting in his chair, "shall we begin?" An older man at the far end of the table leaned forward. "Min-jae, before we start, who is this?" "This is Ariana Cole," Min-jae said simply. Silence. Then another man, younger with slicked back hair, laughed, not kindly. "You brought a woman to council? He paused, his eyes scanning Ariana's face, her clothes that were new but not quite right. "A homeless woman? Is this a joke?" The temperature in the room dropped. Min-jae didn't move, didn't raise his voice. But something shifted in his expression that made every man at the table go perfectly still. "Say that again," Min-jae said quietly. "Please." The younger man's smile faded. "I just meant—" "You meant to disrespect her." Min-jae's voice was ice. "In my presence. At my table." "No, Speak of her with disrespect again," Min-jae interrupted, each word precise and sharp as a blade, "and it will be the last words you ever say. Am I clear?" The room was silent enough to hear breathing. The younger man swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. My apologies." Min-jae's eyes swept across the table, meeting each man's gaze one by one. "Ariana Cole sits at my side because I have chosen it. She is under my protection, my care. Anyone who touches her, threatens her, or speaks ill of her answers to me personally. Is that understood?" Nods around the table. Fearful, confused, but obedient. "Good." Min-jae leaned back in his chair, his hand moving to rest on the arm of Ariana's seat. Possessive, protective. "Now, let's discuss business." The meeting continued, but Ariana barely heard a word. Her heart was hammering too hard. Every man in this room was dangerous. She could tell from the way they carried themselves, the scars on their hands, the coldness in their eyes. And Min-jae had just declared war on anyone who touched her. As they left an hour later, the older man stopped them at the door. "Min-jae, he said carefully. "The others will talk. They'll say you've gone soft, that you have a weakness now." Min-jae looked at him calmly. "She's not homeless anymore," he said quietly. "She's mine, and anyone who sees that as weakness will learn exactly how wrong they are." It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. Ariana had been living in Min-jae's mansion for 3 weeks, long enough to stop jumping at every sound, long enough to smile at the maids who brought her tea, long enough to feel almost safe. That was her mistake. She'd gone to the garden, a beautiful space behind the mansion with flowers and stone paths. 2 guards watched from a distance, but they gave her privacy. She was reading on a bench when she heard footsteps behind her. Before she could turn, something pressed against her mouth. A cloth. Sweet-smelling. Chemical. She tried to fight, but her limbs went heavy. The book fell from her hands. The world tilted sideways. Then everything went black. When Ariana woke up, her head pounded and her mouth tasted like metal. She was sitting in a chair in a dark warehouse, her hands chained behind her back. Cold concrete floor, smell of rust and mold, a single light bulb hanging overhead. 3 men stood in front of her, not the ones from the alley. Different, professional. "She's awake," one of them said in Korean. The tallest man crouched down to her eye level. "Do you know why you're here?" Ariana's heart raced, but she kept her face calm. 847 nights on the streets had taught her one thing: never show fear to predators. "No," she said. "You're bait." He smiled, not friendly. Kang Min-jae thinks he's untouchable, but everyone has a weakness. You're his. He stood up and pulled out his phone. "We'll send him your location. He'll come alone to save you, and when he does, we'll kill him." They left her there, chained to the chair, while they prepared their trap. Stupid. They were so stupid. Rich men who'd never been homeless didn't understand what survival taught you. Didn't know that when you lived on streets, you learned to pick locks with bent wire. Learned to slip out of tight spaces. Learned to stay silent and small and patient. Ariana waited until their footsteps faded. Then she twisted her wrists, testing the chains. Old, rusty, the kind that looked secure but had weak points if you knew where to press. She'd stolen enough locked dumpsters' food to know how metal broke. It took 15 minutes of careful pressure before the chain snapped. Her wrists were bleeding, scraped raw, but she was free. Ariana stood quietly, listening. Voices in the next room. At least 4 men. She needed a weapon. A metal pipe lay in the corner. Not ideal, but better than nothing. She picked it up, testing its weight. Moved toward the door on silent feet. The first guard never saw her coming. She hit him in the back of the head and he dropped like a stone. The second one turned at the sound, reaching for his gun. Ariana swung the pipe hard, catching his wrist. Bone cracked. He screamed. She hit him again, and he went down. The third and fourth men rushed at her together. Ariana dodged, faster than they expected. Street fights were different from trained fighting. Messier, dirtier, more desperate. She didn't fight fair. Kicked one in the knee, hit the other in the throat with the pipe. They both fell. Ariana stood there breathing hard, the pipe still in her bloody hands. Her whole body shook with adrenaline. That's when the warehouse door exploded inward. Min-jae stood in the entrance, surrounded by at least 10 armed men. He was dressed in all black, his face a mask of cold fury. He'd come ready for war. Then he saw her, standing over 4 unconscious bodies, bloodied but alive, holding a metal pipe like a weapon. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Min-jae crossed the warehouse in long strides, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine." Ariana's voice shook, but she kept standing. "I got out myself." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, pride, relief. "I told you I wasn't helpless," Ariana said quietly. "I survived without you for 847 days. She dropped the pipe. It clattered loudly in the silence. "But I don't want to anymore," she whispered. Min-jae pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Min-jae held Ariana for exactly 10 seconds. Then he pulled back, his hands framing her face, his dark eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her chest ache. "Stay with my men," he said quietly. "This won't take long." What are you? But he was already walking away, on toward the 4 men Ariana had knocked unconscious. His own guards followed, moving with practiced efficiency. One of Min-jae's men, young, with kind eyes, guided Ariana outside to a black car. "Wait here, miss. Please." Through the warehouse windows, she could see shadows moving, hear muffled sounds. She didn't want to know what was happening inside. 20 minutes later, Min-jae emerged. His knuckles were bloody. His expression was calm, empty. He slid into the car beside her without a word. "Are they dead?" Ariana asked quietly. "No." Min-jae pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. "But they'll wish they were." The car drove in silence, not back to the mansion, somewhere else. A building Ariana didn't recognize. Underground parking, private elevator, Min-jae's penthouse apartment. It was smaller than the mansion, more personal. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's nighttime lights. Minimalist furniture, everything clean and sharp and controlled. "Sit," Min-jae said, gesturing to the couch. "I'll get the first aid kit." "I'm fine. Your wrists are bleeding. Sit." Ariana sat. He returned with a white box and knelt in front of her. His hands were gentle as he cleaned the scrapes on her wrists where the chains had cut into her skin. He worked in silence, his jaw tight, his movements careful. "I should have had more guards," he said finally. "Should have anticipated this. Should have—" "Stop." Ariana pulled her hand back. "I'm not helpless. I proved that tonight." Min-jae looked up at her, something raw flickering in his dark eyes. "I know," he said quietly. "I've always known." He sat back on his heels, still kneeling in front of her. "You didn't need me to save you," he continued. "You saved yourself, just like you've been doing for 847 days. You're the strongest person I've ever met." Ariana's throat tightened. "Then why keep me here? Why all of this?" "Because I need you to stay." His voice was barely a whisper. "Not because you're helpless, not because you owe me, but because—" He stopped, struggling with words he'd probably never said before. "Because when I was 10 years old, sitting on those church steps, I thought the whole world was cruel, thought kindness was a lie. Then a little girl with fire in her eyes shared her only food with a stranger and didn't ask for anything in return." Min-jae's hands tightened into fists on his knees. "I built an empire on fear and control. Made rules that kept me alive in a world that wanted me dead. But every single one of those rules was about survival, about staying cold and distant and untouchable." He looked up at her, and for the first time, Ariana didn't see the phantom. She saw the crying boy from the church steps. "Every rule I'm breaking now is so you can live," he said. "Not just survive, actually live. Be seen, be safe, be happy." Ariana finished softly. "Yes." She reached out and touched his face. He went completely still, like he was afraid to breathe. "You can't fix my whole life, Min-jae," she said gently. "Can't erase 847 days on the streets by giving me silk sheets and bodyguards." His expression crumbled slightly. "I know. But I can try. But you can stand beside me while I fix it myself." She smiled, small but real. "Can you do that? Stand beside me instead of in front of me?" Min-jae was quiet for a long moment. Then he took her hand, the one touching his face, and pressed his lips to her scraped palm. "Yes," he whispered against her skin. "I can do that." For the first time since the alley, since the mansion, since everything, Ariana felt like she could breathe. She wasn't his possession, she wasn't his project, she was his equal, and he was hers. The news broke 3 days after the warehouse. Someone had leaked photos, Ariana entering the council meeting, Ariana in Min-jae's car, Ariana at his penthouse windows. The headlines were cruel. Phantom King's secret woman, from streets to silk sheets. Seoul's most powerful man falls for homeless girl. Kang Min-jae's mysterious obsession. Who is she? Ariana sat in the mansion's living room, watching the news coverage on TV. Her hands shook as reporters speculated about her past, her motives, whether she was using Min-jae for money. "Turn it off," Min-jae said quietly from the doorway. "They think I'm some kind of gold digger," Ariana whispered. "Think I manipulated you." "I know what you are." He crossed the room and took the remote, shutting off the TV. "That's all that matters." "But the whole city will know the truth." Min-jae pulled out his phone. "I'm calling a press conference tomorrow. I'm going to tell them everything." Ariana's stomach dropped. "No, you can't. Your reputation, your business, I don't care." His voice was firm. "I'm not hiding you anymore. I'm not letting them write your story. If Seoul wants to know who you are, I'll tell them myself." The press conference was held at a luxury hotel, but cameras everywhere, reporters packed into every seat, syndicate leaders standing in the back, watching with calculating eyes. Min-jae stood at a podium, dressed in a perfect black suit. Ariana sat in the front row, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. "Thank you for coming," Min-jae began, his voice calm and clear. "I've called this conference to address the recent media speculation about my personal life." Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward. 15 years ago, Min-jae continued, I was a 10-year-old boy with nothing. My parents had just died. I had no family, no money, no home. I lived on Seoul streets for weeks, invisible to everyone who passed by. The room went silent. One day, I sat on church steps, crying because I was so hungry I couldn't stand. A little girl saw me. She was 7 or 8 years old. Black. American, I think. Also homeless or running away. I never knew. But she had half a sandwich, and she gave it to me without asking for anything in return. Min-jae's eyes found Ariana's in the crowd. That girl taught me something I'd forgotten. Kindness exists. Even when the world is cruel, there are people who choose to be good. She saved my life that day. Then she disappeared. He paused, letting the words sink in. I spent 15 years building my business, gaining power, all with one goal: find the girl who showed me humanity when I was nothing. 3 weeks ago I found her, on Seoul streets, homeless, invisible to the same city that now questions why I brought her home. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Her name is Ariana Cole, Min-jae said firmly. She is not my victim. She is not my trophy. She is not using me for money or status. His voice grew stronger. She is the reason I remember how to be human. She is the person who saved me when no one else cared, and she is under my protection for as long as she chooses to stay. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Kang, are you saying you're in a relationship with a homeless woman? No, Min-jae said calmly. Ariana's heart sank. Then Min-jae looked directly at her. I'm saying I'm in a relationship with the most important person in my life. They called her homeless. They were wrong. She was just waiting to come home. The room exploded with questions, camera flashes, chaos. But Min-jae ignored all of it. He stepped down from the podium, walked to Ariana, and held out his hand. She took it. Together they walked out of the conference hall, past the cameras and the reporters and the judgment. Outside, Seoul's lights glittered like stars. Ready? Min-jae asked quietly. Ariana squeezed his hand. Yes, she said. For the first time in 847 days, she knew exactly where she belonged.